Sign over Grandpa's estate or prepare for court, little bloodless sister. Caroline's words sliced through my office like glass. Her manicured nails tapped against the mahogany table in a steady rhythm, while 4 lawyers sat beside her, their briefcases open, contracts spread like weapons ready for battle. I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 35 years old, founder of a thriving architectural firm in Portland. For the past decade, I've designed sustainable buildings and overseen complex projects. But none of that mattered here. What mattered was that our grandfather, Winston, had died 3 days ago, and Caroline had come to claim what she believed was hers. I set down my coffee and glanced at the papers shoved toward me. A waiver. If I signed, I'd relinquish any claim to Winston's estate. Caroline would become the sole heir to what the world assumed was a $5 million fortune, the Lake Oswego house, the vintage cars, the investment portfolio that cushioned his retirement. You always knew this day would come, Caroline pressed, her icy blue eyes unblinking. Winston may have pretended to love his adopted granddaughter, but blood is blood. The courts will understand you were never really family. One of her attorneys, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel, leaned forward. Miss Mitchell, this is generous. Your sister could pursue litigation based on bloodline precedents. She's willing to spare you that trouble if you acknowledge the natural order of inheritance. I reached for my tea kettle, the small ritual steadying my nerves. Caroline had always mistaken my calm for weakness. Even as children, she treated my adoption as a scar, proof I didn't belong. What she never understood was that Winston had chosen me. He had fought for me. Would anyone care for tea? I asked lightly, rising to prepare the service. I have a fine Earl Grey Winston brought back from London. Caroline's face tightened. This isn't social, Rebecca. Sign the papers. I poured hot water over the leaves, letting the rich scent bloom. Winston had taught me this ritual himself, during countless afternoons in his study. Those lessons, the stories, the quiet wisdom, were more valuable than anything on Caroline's spreadsheets. Of course, I said smoothly, returning with the tray. I understand. You want this done quickly, without complications. I smiled at her attorneys. They shifted in their seats, uneasy under the warmth of my gaze. Tomorrow morning, I'll make sure everything is handled. Caroline's shoulders eased, mistaking composure for surrender. She didn't know that by tomorrow, everything she thought she knew about Winston's fortune would collapse. The truth had been building for years, hidden in conversations Caroline never cared to hear. While she spent Winston's money on vacations and designer clothes, I spent evenings listening to his ideas about legacy and responsibility. In college, when I studied architecture, Winston had confided in me about property investments abroad. I asked questions, analyzed reports, shared in his excitement. What began as casual talks grew into serious research on London, Barcelona, Singapore. Caroline dismissed it all as boring. She rolled her eyes at family dinners, too busy scrolling her phone to notice the quiet disappointment in Winston's eyes. The turning point came at her birthday party 2 years ago. She demanded Winston cover a lavish dinner for her friends, never once thanking him, never once asking about his health. That night, as I helped him to his car, he confessed what I already sensed: she saw him as a wallet, nothing more. Soon after, he showed me the truth: property deeds, trust agreements, and offshore accounts worth far more than the $5 million everyone assumed. Over $20 million, spread across prime real estate in Europe and Asia. Caroline sees money as something to spend, he told me. You see it as something to build with. 6 months before his death, Winston formalized it. With his lawyer James Crawford present via video call, he transferred his true wealth to me: the foreign holdings, the trusts, the accounts. Caroline would inherit the domestic assets she coveted, but the empire, his vision, was mine. You are the granddaughter of my heart, Winston had told me quietly that night. Family is chosen, Rebecca. And you've chosen me, as I chose you. Now, as Caroline plotted her easy victory, she had no idea that the stage was already set. Tomorrow, she would walk into Crawford and Associates expecting triumph. Instead, she'd discover the limits of entitlement, and the legacy Winston had entrusted to me. Caroline wore a brand new designer dress, no doubt purchased in anticipation of her inheritance. I know Winston cared about you, she said coolly, but family law is clear about biological precedents. Her lead attorney, the same silver-haired man from yesterday, nodded. Your sister is being generous, Miss Mitchell. Most biological heirs would pursue litigation to strip an adoptee of any claim. I smiled as the elevator climbed. None of them realized they were about to walk into James Crawford's office, the very place where Winston's international empire had been built and managed. Caroline had memorized probate law but never bothered to look beyond Oregon's borders. Crawford welcomed us into his corner office overlooking the Willamette River. Distinguished, precise, every gesture measured, he was a man who had spent a lifetime shaping complex fortunes. His assistant poured coffee into delicate china as we took our seats. Before we begin, Crawford said, opening a thick file, it's important to clarify the scope of Winston Mitchell's estate planning. There are domestic assets, which pass through probate, and international holdings governed by other legal structures. Caroline's lawyer leaned forward. Our research shows the estate consists of the Lake Oswego residence, vintage automobiles, and investments, roughly $5 million. Crawford inclined his head. Correct. Those domestic assets will transfer to Caroline as the biological heir, but they represent only about 20% of Winston's total wealth. The room froze. Caroline's confident mask faltered. 20%? She repeated. Winston built an extensive international real estate portfolio, London, Barcelona, Singapore, valued at over $20 million. One of her attorneys tried to rally, then those assets would also fall under inheritance law. Ordinarily, yes, Crawford replied evenly, but Winston transferred legal ownership 3 years ago into offshore trusts, naming Rebecca Mitchell as sole beneficiary. He retained management rights while alive, but the trusts became Rebecca's the moment they were executed. Caroline's face drained of color. That's impossible. He never told me. He documented his reasons thoroughly, Crawford said, sliding forward another folder. Concerns about transactional family relationships. He wanted his legacy stewarded, not squandered. Her lead attorney's pen scratched furiously. We'll review everything. If there's evidence of undue influence. Crawford produced medical records, psychological evaluations, and even video recordings of Winston explaining his choices. He pressed play on one of the audio files. Caroline's own voice filled the room. Come on, Grandpa. It's just money. You can't take it with you. I deserve to enjoy life while I'm young. The color rose in her cheeks. That was taken out of context. The recording rolled on. Winston's gentle reply contrasting sharply. I wonder if you've thought about where this money comes from, or what happens when it's gone. Her recorded laugh was cutting. That's your job, not mine. I'm not boring like Rebecca. One by one, Crawford played the evidence, demands for vacation money, casual dismissals of Winston's concerns. Then came the contrast, my conversations with him, discussing architecture, investments, his health. This is the pattern that informed his decision, Crawford said. Rebecca asked about his doctor's visits. She offered help. She showed interest in his work. Caroline did not. Her attorney scrambled for footing. Even so, emotional manipulation. There was none. Crawford cut in. Winston consulted multiple attorneys and 2 medical professionals. He knew exactly what he was doing. He read aloud Winston's handwritten statement. Blood does not guarantee love or responsibility. Rebecca has shown me the legacy I wish to leave. Wealth is not a prize, it is a trust. Caroline shot to her feet, chair screeching. So an adopted stranger gets $20 million while I get scraps? You're receiving over $4 million in domestic assets, Crawford corrected. That is hardly scraps. But she wasn't listening. Rage colored her face. She poisoned him against me. This is fraud. Crawford remained calm. 3 independent attorneys, 2 doctors, and 5 years of documentation say otherwise. As her lawyers whispered among themselves, Crawford dealt the final blow, a live video call. His son, James Crawford Jr., appeared from London, surrounded by property files. Good morning. We've received Rebecca's signed management agreements for the London portfolio. We're prepared to move forward with the Barcelona expansion whenever she's ready. Barcelona, expansion? Caroline stammered. Winston structured the trusts for growth, Crawford Sr. explained. He believed Rebecca would not just preserve wealth, but build upon it. I finally spoke. Caroline, Winston hoped you'd care about more than money. He waited for you to ask about his health, his dreams. You never did. You turned him against me, she whispered. I listened. I said softly, that's all. Crawford handed her a final envelope, Winston's personal letter. Caroline's hand shook as she read. I have left you well provided for, but could not entrust my life's work to someone who sees money as entertainment. Relationships require more than blood, they require respect, care, and recognition that people are more than bank accounts. Caroline crumpled the letter, tears streaking her cheeks. Her attorney made one last threat. We reserve the right to challenge in international court. You may, Crawford said evenly, but such litigation would require 3 jurisdictions, London, Barcelona, Singapore. Legal fees alone would surpass your client's inheritance. Silence settled over the room. Caroline had walked in expecting victory. Instead, she'd been handed the cost of her own indifference. The mathematics of revenge were elegant in their simplicity. Winston had designed his estate so that any attempt to contest it would bankrupt Caroline, while the true fortune lay forever beyond the reach of domestic courts. As her lawyers packed up in defeat, Caroline's eyes locked on mine, hurt, furious, desperate. This isn't over, Rebecca. I'll prove you manipulated him. I held her gaze. Winston made his choice based on years of behavior. Nothing I said could have outweighed how we treated him. The truth hung heavy between us. Caroline had lost more than money. She had lost the respect of a grandfather who had tried to love her despite her selfishness. When the elevator doors closed on her retreat, I stayed behind in Crawford's office, staring out at Portland's skyline. The city looked different, alive with possibilities Winston had entrusted to me. He'd be proud, Crawford said gently. He believed you would carry this wisely. I nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing into place. The inheritance wasn't wealth, it was stewardship. 6 months later, in London, I watched Caroline's last desperate challenge collapse in the British High Court. The ruling was absolute. Winston's transfers were lawful, his mind clear, his intent unshakable. Caroline had sacrificed everything, her car, her jewelry, her apartment, to fund a doomed battle across 3 continents. The inheritance she once flaunted was gone, swallowed by legal fees and debts. From the glass windows of Bright Hollow Labs' European headquarters, I looked out over the Thames, sunlight glinting across Winston's properties that had already tripled in value. Barcelona was thriving, Singapore waiting on the horizon. Miss Mitchell, my assistant said softly, your sister is here. I found Caroline in reception, thinner, hollow-eyed, dressed in clothes that no longer boasted status. The arrogance was gone. Rebecca, she whispered, voice cracked, please, I need to talk to you. In a small conference room, she admitted what I never thought I'd hear. I've lost everything. I was wrong, about you, about Grandpa. I thought family meant entitlement. I never earned his love. For the first time in years, I saw not my rival but my sister. I drew out the envelope Winston had left me for this moment. If you're hearing this, I read, it means Caroline has learned through hardship what love could not teach. She is still my granddaughter. May this lesson guide her to become more than she was. Inside were instructions for a modest trust, enough for her to live on if she proved change through work and service. He never wanted you destroyed, I told her. He wanted you to grow. Caroline wept openly, her pride stripped away. Can I work for you? Learn? Prove I can be better? I thought of Winston's hope for reconciliation. Barcelona needs an assistant property manager, small salary, long hours, but it's a start. She gripped my hand, grateful. For the first time, she sounded sincere. In the years that followed, Caroline's fall became infamous. Her reckless lawsuits and entitled demands were dissected in legal journals and whispered about in social circles. She became a cautionary tale, an heiress who lost everything because she treated love like a transaction. But in Barcelona, she showed up every morning, learning slowly, humbly, painfully. And in London, as I signed contracts for a Singapore expansion, I understood Winston's final gift. Revenge wasn't in destroying Caroline, it was in giving her a choice between ruin and redemption. I had inherited not just an empire, but a lesson. The true measure of wealth is not what you spend, but what you build, and who you choose to build it with.